The prophet looks around. He sees another cycle of history beginning. The people are fracturing. Parent is pitted against child. The world once again beginning to change. Yet he is baffled. His king does not see this change, refuses to see it. So the prophet is called to speak. The people have been told what it is that they must do. Few listen. They have chosen the comfort of complacency, excess over ethics. They say, all is well, when nothing is well. They have chosen themselves over the collective. The prophet is called to speak, and few listen. Instead, they follow their own counsels, the willfulness of their evil hearts. They go backward, not forward. Our prophet is stubborn. He tries again. But the people are even more stubborn, stiff-necked, too stiff even to turn toward each other. The prophet declares, because my people are shattered, I am shattered. This is Jeremiah, the prophet 2,700 years ago in the 7th century BCE. Jeremiah saw the temple destroyed. He saw the stones fall. He saw the hunger and the destitution in the streets after Jerusalem's conquering. He came to see the future he had feared, the one he had tried to prevent. But before that future came, he spoke. And before that, he wept. He wept at the state of his community. He wept, trying. Why? He felt responsible. He could see what was happening, what would be inevitable. But he could also see another way, a different way forward. But he couldn't change the future that he feared. Oh, that my head were water, my eyes a font of tears. Then would I weep day and night for the slain of my poor people. This, Jeremiah and God say together in one voice. Each of our prophets, including our namesake Micah, have a story just like this. A call, a clarion moment when the injustices of the world become intolerable. A shattering moment. As the community faces external peril and internal threats. And in that moment, the prophet can hear the silent sigh of human anguish. While the world is at ease and asleep, the prophet feels the blast from heaven, as Abraham Joshua Heschel puts it. And in these strange days, I find myself turning to their words more and more. These shattering, anxious days and the questions they bring. What will come with this next election? What is the future of our democracy, of democracy? Will they ever stop hating us? When will this war end? Can there ever be peace? I look to our prophets because they looked too at an unknown future, because I look at a future of more and more unknown unknowns, because they were restless, because I am restless, because they were honest, because I am trying to be, because they were discomfited, because I am, because I wish I could turn away, because I cannot, because they did not. So I turn to them, to our prophets, to their holy words. After all, I had been taught that ours was the movement of prophetic Judaism. The early reformers of Judaism, reading Jeremiah, Isaiah, Amos, and Micah, universalized their message beyond their original context. 19th century Reform founding father Abraham Geiger wrote, "Poets and prophets complain of sufferings and trials. They present the riddles of human experience. They cannot understand why many fare well or ill on the earth, contrary to their practices. They confess, too, that they are unable to find the full explanation of such facts." Our stories and teachings of these visionaries became for him the most viable and important component of Judaism, the eternal element in Judaism most worth holding on to. We quote many of them today. Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly. My house shall be a house of prayer for all people. Is this the fast I desire? The prophets' concern for the poor and downtrodden, their contempt for ritual acts unaccompanied by social morality, and their vision of peace for all humanity. This is what made the prophets both timely and contemporary. And still, I have the feeling that what we hear of the timely, of the timeless prophetic call is but an echo of an echo. If we are truly to be the flag bearers of the prophetic tradition, we must read them seriously. We must let them break us open like Jeremiah was broken open, their fierceness, their inability to turn away. It must compel us to more. What is that more? It is, I have to say, more than just their very important exhortations of justice, more than just their social justice message. It is more. So a starting point. Our teacher, Rabbi Larry Hoffman, defines religious as the practice of speaking in a register that does justice to the human condition. The features of that human condition on display here in our Yom Kippur liturgy: our mortality, our suffering, our enabling of other sufferings, our mistakes and failings, our awareness of all of them, and our capacity to feel joy, enhanced by the knowledge that it is fleeting, our ability to dream and hope, our power to create and love. And yet, how often do we fail to do justice to all of this? How often do we turn to everything else but the depths of human experience, engage in pablum rather than pathos? I know I myself am guilty of this far too often. How I try to ignore the inescapable burden of being human. And still, I stand here on this day, prayer book open, eyes open, heart broken open, and I know I can be more, do more. I know we can be more, do more. This, Abraham Joshua Heschel tells us, is the prophetic purpose. They speak in a higher register, notes one octave too high, he says. We wish not to hear them, their heart-shattering, discordant, comfort-shattering notes. And yes, we must, and yet we must. They are our more, our higher register. Heschel again, the prophet is a man who feels fiercely. God has thrust a burden upon his soul, and he is stunned at man's fierce greed. Prophecy is the voice that God has lent to the silent agony. It is a form of living, a crossing point of God and man. God is raging in the prophet's words. God is raging. The prophet rages because the prophet knows that we, the world, has the ability to be better, that we have the ability to be and do better, and the fact that we make other choices causes a deep rage and sadness that causes a bursting out, the call from high that must not be ignored. So I call on us today to speak in a higher register, that register that does justice to the human condition. and the prophets can teach us how. Not because we believe we are prophets ourselves, not because we believe that God is speaking to us personally, but because their passion, their ability to see and speak truth to be better than our current moment is what we need. Scholar Susanna Heschel writes, "What is needed is prophetic passion. Religion is not a series of propositions nor a social order that creates community through ritual performance. Religion demands affect, emotional commitment, and stirs the basic human need for engagement with other human beings." It is about ethics, but it's not just about ethics. It's also about transcendence, knowing we can do more, yes, but also knowing we can be that more, knowing that there is a bigger story at play and that we are part of it. I know this is difficult. After all, there were so few true prophets that today they fit together in one small section on my bookshelf. And they were very much unpopular. They were attacked, imprisoned, shamed for their words. It was embarrassing to be a prophet, Susanna Heschel writes. There were so many pretenders predicting peace and prosperity, offering cheer, adding strength to self-reliance, while the prophet predicts disaster, pestilence, agony, and destruction. People need exhortations to courage, endurance, confidence, fighting spirit, but instead Jeremiah proclaims, "You are about to die if you don't have a change of heart and cease being callous." And it's not that I don't believe in encouragement, about cheering each other on and building that resilience and confidence. But what I hear in the prophets' desperation is that they understand the stakes. They can see beyond themselves. They see an invasion, a culture that venerates the ephemeral rather than the eternal. They see a culture that pits human against human for sport. They see opulence venerated right next to destitution. They see things that are legal but unjust. They see their world changing too rapidly to stop. And when others pose solutions to the prophets, they seem tepid, tentative, devoid of the passion they themselves so deeply feel. And us too, in this moment. When there are threats within and without, when there are real people who actively seek our destruction, when there is a refusal to adapt even as our planet is pushing back on us, when lies are blindly accepted and truth is mocked, when we talk past each other, how do we help ourselves be greater than the moment? Especially when the moment seems too large and too difficult to see beyond. How can we remember that we always have the capacity for more? I believe this is the intent of the prophetic message, to look and see what's more, what else there is, what other ways of being are possible, to practice being more, to practice speaking in that higher register, to speak in a way that does justice to the human condition. Let us all speak in that higher register. Perhaps not all the time, but in the words of Heschel, to allow a grain of prophet to grow within us all. Just a grain. How? Biblical scholar Walter Brueggemann suggests that there are 4 features of a community that is capable of holding those small grains of prophecy. He says, 1, there must be a long memory that sinks the present generation deep into an identifiable past. This memory is told in song and story. 2, there is an expressed sense of pain that is owned and recited as a real social fact, that is visibly acknowledged in a public way, and that is understood as unbearable for the long term. 3, there is an effective mode of discourse that is cherished across the generations. 4, there is an active practice of hope, a community that knows about promises yet to be kept. Important for Brueggemann is that this takes place in what he calls a sub-community, a group of people who sit both within and outside a broader community. This is what enables them to ask different questions and prime themselves for a different kind of discourse. And as I read these four things and this idea of a sub-community, what I see is us. I see the synagogue, I see the Jewish community, I see Temple Micah. We have that long memory. We are part of a story that roots us in a promise of humanity, a story which our ancestors chose to root in a grand narrative of overcoming oppression, a story which believes in both human agency and a fervent belief that evil can be, will be overcome, and not just replaced with a different form of evil. And we have songs. We have songs that speak of exile. We sing songs of joy, of praise and struggle. We have a past, mythic and real, that instructs us and propels us, that lifts up times when we have succeeded in becoming more. To his second point, we too have an expressed sense of pain, that the world as it is as it is, and not as it should be, not as we hope it to be, that there is still hunger, that there is still not peace, that there are still people ripped from their homes and their families, that we cannot protect our children while they sit in their classrooms, that there is still not peace. I know we have this expressed sense of pain because I've cried with you. We've felt this pain together too many times. And as much as I hate the times that have brought us together in pain, I am, without a doubt, grateful that our synagogue is a place that allows pain to live out loud, that does not push it aside because it makes us uncomfortable, because doing justice to the human condition requires that we make space for all our pain and all the pain of those suffering outside our walls, because we can hold it. We can hold it. And three, we have such a beautiful mode of discourse. The love of questioning, the rabbinic process of interpretation and multivocality, the idea that two partners in debate can be as iron sharpens iron. We believe that talking to each other, debating each other, makes all of us better. We know that every argument that is for the sake of heaven will endure. When we engage in honest discourse for the sake of holy purpose, it helps us, like the prophets, speak in that higher register. When we stay at the table, when we stay in relationship, it raises us all up. And lastly, 4, we have an active practice of hope. This practice of hope is baked into the essence of Judaism. We don't just have an ancient story of hope, we are that story. We are that story. All of our stories are beginnings. The promise is never fulfilled. The promised land is always in front of us. There is always hope that we will reach it, or at least that we'll make things better as we try. And it is this hope that bolsters and animates us, that even as we set out on yet another cycle, another cyclical quest, we maintain the belief that history does not repeat itself, will not, and that this time around we can be better and do better. Vaclav Havel reminds us that hope is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense regardless of how it turns out. Amen. Is this not the hope of the Jewish people? that hope of 2,000 years, that although we see the realities of the world around us, that although we have lived through exiles and destructions and pogroms and attempts at our extermination, that although we have had every opportunity to give up, we don't. We haven't, we endure. We endure. Memory, a sense of pain, discourse, and hope. The prophets engage themselves in these four behaviors also. They help us see ourselves in a larger story. First among our prophets, Moses so frequently reminds the Israelites of their liberation from Egypt, and Miriam, a prophet in her own right, ensures that our story can continue and helps us translate our journey into song. They not only transmit memory, but help translate it for a new generation. To always enable others to ask, what is the purpose of the Exodus? What is the purpose of our having been freed? For us, in this generation, and in this generation, and in this one. What is our responsibility to be in covenant with these people in this society? And our prophets teach us how to speak and express sense of pain out loud. When Hosea does this, when he laments, there is no truth nor love, there is swearing and lying, killing and stealing. They break all bonds, and blood touches blood. And Amos, he looks at his world. He says, you would sell out the innocent for silver, the needy for a pair of shoes. You turn aside the way of the afflicted. The prophets created their own legacy of discourse, of telling the truth no matter how inconvenient. Like the very first prophet, Abraham, debating and pushing back against the creator of the universe. Will the judge of all the earth not judge justly? But perhaps what the prophets did most of all is that they hoped. They always returned to hope. Isaiah asks, can we abandon despair and respond when God asks? Who will speak for me? Who will remember the covenant of peace and compassion? They knew the state of their world. They knew that no one could foresee a future without war, so they did not preach pacifism, but still they believed that peace was possible. They hoped of a world that we cannot forget. This was the hope of Isaiah, a world of coexistence, not domination. Coexistence, not domination, where swords will be melted down to become farming tools. It's also the hope of Micah, to dream of a day where all of us will have our own vine and fig tree, and none of us will ever have to act out of fear again. And it's the hope of Malachi, the hope that when a more redeemed world does come, that the hearts of generations will turn towards each other. The hearts of the children will turn towards the hearts of the elders, the hearts of the parents towards their children. And they didn't just hope for it. They actually believed it to be possible. While Jeremiah is prophesying the exile and the destruction of his people, a strange thing happens. He still acquires a share of land from his uncle. Why is this there? Why is there a land purchase? It's because even as Jeremiah knows that he will likely never set foot on that piece of land ever again, it becomes a part of the future that he can only hope for. So he holds on to it. All of this must be our job as well. to hear and speak in a higher register. It requires that we know who we are, where we came from, and who we desperately want to be. It is to be more whenever we can. Where others want us to see simplicity, we must fight for complexity, struggle with multiple truths side by side. I know others aren't doing it. I know it's easier to play their game. Refuse. When others can't see a way forward, imagine one. As Brueggemann writes, the prophet does as if the vision can be implemented. We must keep on conjuring and proposing futures alternative to the single one we are told is the only thinkable one. This is also the experience of Esther, who the rabbis imagined was actually also a prophet, perhaps maybe because they too were desperate for prophecy. As her story reminds us, if you keep silent now, you will not be able to justify yourself because you had the opportunity of doing good in your lifetime and you did not. I don't know that things will get any easier than they have been in the last year, at least not for some time. But I do believe that we have the ability, the capacity to live through this moment better than we are now. The world is trying to convince us to be less, but we can do more. We can be more. We have to be more. The moment urges us to be. The prophets begged us to be. Keni Hiratzon, may this be our will.